This is episode 77 of Cinescope, and I'll be right here. Welcome to Cinescope, where our goal is not to criticize or to assign ratings, but rather to celebrate the movies we love, exploring story, characters, music, and relevance to the world around us. I'm your host, Chad Hopkins, and joining me today is Don Shanahan to talk about one of our favorite films, E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. Don, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, Chad. Thank you for having me back. It's nice to see you off of hiatus and to fire this up again.
Yes, I've got to say, it felt real good to read that opening paragraph for the first time in a while.
I bet.
I want to apologize to everybody out there. This was totally unintentional. This is being the first proper episode of Cinescope since February. That was right before I left to San Antonio for a conference. And then I got back and it was just like, well, now we've got UIL for a competition for my orchestra in a couple of weeks. And I've got this and I've got this. And now we're in the final 6 weeks of school. And hopefully I'll be able to get this ball rolling a little bit more regularly because, man, I miss it. And so I'm glad to be back.
No, as a fellow school teacher, I feel your pain. When is that magic last day of school? I know you got the countdown somewhere.
I do. We're in the final less than 30 days at this point, I think. I think it's June 5th or June 6th. That
I think I'm a June 12th guy because we have to come back on Monday because we had a snow day up here where we're like, gotta bump one day.
That's a bummer, but still not too far off. We're getting close.
No, not bad. We are also under 30.
Great. There it is. Under 30 for the win. And then we have several days and months of break, fortunately.
Do you, just sidebar question, I know it's a distracting thing to get us going. Do you feel like you hit it pretty hard in the summer? Do you find yourself seeing more films and having more time? Do you take that teacher's free time to really absorb and catch up? Or is it nice to have summer and even make sure that goes a little slower too?
A little of both. I do feel like I see movies a little bit more often just because I get the chance to not go to work those 8 hours a day and not have to feel the need to feel mentally fresh for my students. So, I get to go to the movies more often, especially with a summer like this one we've got coming up. There's big release after big release, starting with Infinity War really this weekend, and I'll be seeing that tomorrow. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to relaxing and hopefully diving into my Blu-ray collection a little bit more too, because I'm behind on that.
I hear you. The to-do list never ends, let me tell you.
That's the truth. Well, moving things right along, I do want to thank mrushing02 for our latest review. I don't remember exactly when that happened, but it has been since last official episode, so thank you for the review. And I'm hoping that this episode sort of starts off a sort of Spielberg or Spielberg adjacent month. I'm really wanting to talk about the Goonies soon too. So maybe May will be Spielberg month. We'll see.
Coincidentally, I know we kind of found each other with this film we're going to talk about today, where I'm actually hosting at a local theater here, kind of being the critic dude. I'm hosting a kids film series where we have kid-specific screenings with talkbacks afterwards, where we try to have more critical thinking questions, but really targeted to the kids for Q&A instead of the adults. And this past weekend, we just had E.T. And next week, not this weekend, but next weekend, we actually have the Goonies, because our theme is mischievous kids. So we did Willy Wonka, we have E.T., we'll have Goonies, Big, and then I'm going to miss the last one, Home Alone. So there's our 5 set. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I just talked to Aaron White over at Feel and Film about, and Patrick, of course. I was on to talk about Moneyball, and we talked about Aaron's recent experience talking about La La Land with a live audience after viewing and sort of debating its merits and demerits, I suppose, afterwards. And then Patrick talking to kids at a local middle school about podcasting. And I just love that idea of bringing this to the general population outside of just like you and me. We're movie people, and Aaron and Patrick are movie people. People at a middle school or people just out in the public maybe aren't the same. And I love the idea of bringing the merits of this kind of discussion into the real world proper.
Absolutely. And with you and I as school teachers, I know we know how to carry ourselves in front of a crowd and know how to approach children with it, which I really enjoy because I've seen the Q&As at more artsy fartsy things and it's just really dry. But you have kids that just got done watching a movie with a lot of enthusiasm or a lot of heart and they just open up. They're a fun bunch to talk to, I must say.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I'll have to try something like that sometime. Well, with that, let's go ahead and dive into our movie. We are talking about E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. This was sort of inspired by some recent discussion in the Feel and Film Facebook group, because some people like this movie and some people don't, and I don't understand the latter, but I'm excited to dive in.
Man, oh man. No, to give some stats, just to kind of pace this along. The film was released in June 11th, 1982. Fun fact there, it stayed in theaters as if we're watching movies coming out in theaters now that last maybe 8 to 12 weeks. It stayed in theaters over a year, over 53 weeks, and
Wow.
It just raked up past Star Wars at the time for being the highest grossing film. At that time, it got passed again then by, coincidentally enough, Spielberg's film Jurassic Park in 1993. So quite an impressive thing. It's directed by Steven Spielberg. His resume speaks for itself, but to throw some names out there for those folks who need it are Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the other Indiana Jones films. Schindler's List, his Oscar winner, Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan, Catch Me If You Can, Lincoln, Warhorse, the BFG, last year's Oscar nominee, The Post, and he's raking it in theaters right now with Ready Player One. From that list, Chad, which one do you have a top Spielberg film?
Oh man, you're asking the hard questions.
I know.
I've got to say, I love Lincoln. Like Lincoln,
Okay.
it's not maybe the popular choice, but I have so much love for Daniel Day-Lewis in that role, and the emphasis on history and real focus on drama. It is just, oh man, that film is so special to me.
Yeah, I admit, as that film critic, I have the hard time where if you ask me best, then I also have to think of favorite. For me, his best is probably, in the artsy fartsy department, to use the word again, is probably Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan. In terms of favorite for me, is the one we're talking about today. E.T. is just way up there on the love chart. So tell us more about the film.
Yeah, if you ask me the one that makes me cry the most, it is E.T. Just to throw that out there. If you'd seen me 20 minutes ago finishing up this film, I'm just a mess.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I cried in front of children this past weekend. So, oh yeah.
It was written by Melissa Matheson, music by John Williams, who, I mean, for his...
Yeah.
I don't need to go into detail. I never have to. It's Spielberg's filmography plus Star Wars, the first 3 Harry Potter films, and lots more iconic films. So thank you, Mr. John Williams, and this is a special one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It stars Henry Thomas, Pat Welsh, Dee Wallace, Peter Coyote, Robert McNaughton, Drew Barrymore, Casey Martell, Sean Fry, C. Thomas Howell, and Erica Eleniak. There it is.
Erica Eleniak, yep.
So personally, looking at that cast list, there's not one that necessarily stands out to me as big name star. Drew Barrymore, certainly nowadays, but there's none of those names that have really stuck around that I'm aware of. And I think that sort of draws to the I don't know, the innocence of the film and not having a certain big name person attached to it.
Right. I mean, you have steady careers there. You know, Peter Coyote's been a voice actor for a long time. Dee Wallace had a good career before this film. Henry Thomas still acts to this day is just in a lot of supporting films. He definitely wasn't catapulted to be a star the way that Drew Barrymore kind of came out of this as a star. See, Thomas Howell's done some stuff. This was his film debut. Mm-hmm. If I'm a dirty horn dog kind of guy, Eric Eleniak ended up jumping out of a cake topless and Under Siege. That always works. But I think the unknown quality of the actors helps because I know Spielberg has gone on to work with the best people, where occasionally you get these amazing films where they're really creating an environment, but sometimes they're creating this environment and all you see is, oh wow, look at that, that's Tom Hanks. Mm-hmm. You know, it's hard to separate when it's, so many known people. I think that's why recently one of my favorites from him is Warhorse, because other than a then kind of not so super known Benedict Cumberbatch and a then not so super known Tom Hiddleston, that film is mostly unknowns, and I think and then it follows a horse. So I think that those kinds of films to me on his filmography play better than the whiz bow wham of star power. Like even Ready Player One doesn't have a super huge star there, and it's better for it a little bit.
I agree. Do you remember your first time watching this movie back in 1982?
Oh gosh, no. I would have been. I'm 38 and born in 79, so I would have been 3 years old. I
Okay.
don't remember watching it. I remember owning it. I remember owning a copy of the VHS tape that came from McDonald's. I remember the side of the VHS case having a McDonald's logo on it because it was some like eat this many meals prize redemption thing where I don't know. I my brain just sees the VHS sleeve with the McDonald's logo down in the corner where it was like an exclusive get for doing a thing. So I remember by owning it, having that be on replay and being a frequent thing. But no, I don't remember the first time. I do remember being scared more than loving it, where I don't think this film really clicked on another level to me till I saw it when I was older. So it wasn't a cuddly family favorite. It was more a watch it to distract yourself while mommy's doing something kind of thing. It wasn't a I wish I could say I have this like back of a station wagon at a drive-in or a cuddly couch family memory story to it, but I don't. Do you have? What's your first experience with it?
See, I don't remember my first time either. I remember moments from the film, as I do
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of films from that time in my life. I remember the Reese's Pieces. I remember the solar system where E.T. simulates it floating through the air. I remember Elliot cutting his hand on the finger on the saw, and
Mm-hmm.
then I remember the scary laboratory scenes where E.T. is
Mm-hmm.
dying, and that's what really stands out to me is sort of what you were saying, being scared while watching this movie.
Yeah.
And, honestly, even getting older, I don't think I truly have a first experience that I remember with this film, seeing from start to
Mm-hmm.
finish until I was more or less an adult. And
Sure.
so I don't have necessarily a lot of nostalgia love for this movie. I have a lot of genuine, I think this movie is great love for this
Me
movie.
too. Me too. So, I mean, when it comes to repeat viewings, what has kind of evolved for you? It's like for me, the fear hasn't subsided. I still get tense, even though I know he's going to be fine in those hospital/medical scenes. I'm still clamped up every time.
For me, I always latch on to the interpersonal relationships. I latch on really heavily to Elliot and to E.T.'s friendship and their connection. And I mean
Mhm.
that's just a through point with me with any movie. How to Train Your
Sure.
Dragon is possibly my
Ah,
favorite animated movie of all time.
yeah.
And you could get that same sort of companionship in that movie as you do here in E.T.
Hmm.
In fact, there's a scene that almost echoes the forbidden friendship scene in How to Train Your Dragon with Elliot and E.T. interacting for the first time in the bedroom.
Yeah,
Very
definitely.
little dialogue, just
Mhm.
interacting with each other.
Something that has changed for me with repeat viewings, at least recently, is becoming a parent. Um, I now I put the poll question out there when I was hosting this film this past week about like what age would you show this to your children, because I have a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son where I don't think the 3-year-old's ready for it, but my 5-year-old might. And I'm like, could she handle this film? And I kind of wanted that kind of fellow parent or fellow, opinion advice of what's a good age to watch this film to have that first experience. And I know, unlike my first experience with this film, I want to cuddle on the couch with my daughter and go, "Hey, I got this great movie for you. I really think you're gonna like it." And it's ET, and have that pause and ask questions if she has to, or come on over and hide in my lap kind of thing if you're scared. But I don't, at 5, I don't think she can hang. I think the consensus number I got in a couple of polls was about 8.
That's sort of what I lean to. I mean, I'm not a
Yeah.
parent, but I think this is the kind of movie I would want to, or I would want somebody else to remember the details
Yeah.
of the film their first time watching it. And I think 8 is right around that age where that's really
Hmm.
going to lock in.
Yeah.
I remember snippets of my very first movie in the theater when I was 5, but
Okay.
even then it's snippets. I remember
Yeah.
specific moments while watching that movie, and I don't remember all of that whole first experience.
Okay. So I mean, going into the film, I know you talked about the through point in terms of interpersonal relationships. What part of the story do you like most, or what stands out for you from this, revered classic?
Well, I love a lot of the cinematography in this film,
Mm.
and the first one that really stands out to me, and it's not something I'd ever noticed before, was the contrast right off the bat of us seeing the spaceship through the trees and it being a mystifying sight to us as humans. And then E.T. looking out through those same trees out at the city, and that being
definitely
mystifying to him. And it's just a matter of perspective. This is a new world for us, seeing a spaceship, and a new world for him, seeing a vast city with people he's never interacted with, a species he's never interacted with.
I'm right there with you with perspective. Something I learned about the film recently that I saw but never noticed and thought it was intentional. Spielberg shot the film predominantly for 90% of the film at a child's eye level. Like, intentional low angles, intentional low point of view. I mean, obviously it's seen a lot with our Peter Coyote character of Keys, where, every time we see kind of the humans, it's almost like a Tom and Jerry cartoon where we only see them from like the waist up because that's the height of our characters and our viewpoint, or even the height of ET, where I like that very intentional use of the low angles where, the adults are seen as being above this, not quite into it, ready for what's happening, or even aware and noticing what's happening below them a lot of times, especially with Dee Wallace's character. But I like how that was a cinematography choice to, like you said, with perspective, to bring it down to that level. That's something I learned recently, and I made a point to pay attention to this last time I saw it, and that really was impressive to me. Like the only shot I remember, like the one that was most obvious as not being at that waist level, was finally when they're back at the house and the medical and science teams are there and the camera's above that walking tunnel. And then finally, then you're above where the kids are, because now the situation in a way is elevated higher than where the kids can control. I thought, where those intentional choices of perspective are really fascinating.
You remind me of Roger Ebert's review for this film, which isn't so much a review.
Okay. I have never read or seen his review for this.
Oh man, it is something so special. It's written as a letter to his grandchildren.
How about
where
that?
He's talking about viewing this movie with them and looking at the film through their eyes and seeing how they react to the film and how they understood things about the characters based on the perspective of the camera, and how it's just so special. I would love to just like sit here and read the whole thing on the podcast, but I'll put it in the show notes instead, because it is such a fantastic review.
I will hit that up after this. You bet.
Now, other shots that stand out to me, there's I think one of the more obvious ones where Elliot is first looking for E.T. in the backyard, and you have the moon shining down in the fog, and then you've got the shed with the light just beaming light out of it, and it's totally otherworldly.
I enjoyed the soft, almost stained glass church-like atmosphere that the closet got with the stuffed animals, where that was like the little protected space for Big Brother, Little Sister, and Elliot. And I liked how that was every time E.T. was there, it was a safe place for all the children in E.T. And I liked the look of those scenes as well.
The way Spielberg uses certain items in the story, the use of the flowers to signify E.T.'s life force, that's such a powerful storytelling device, especially when you get towards the end and the resurrection. Well, the death first and then the resurrection. Having Mike see the flowers and knowing instinctively that these are dying, and so E.T. must as well. And then Elliot walking away from E.T.'s body, seeing them start to bloom again, and understanding, oh, he's back, and we have to get him out of here. That's such a, I don't know what the specific term for that would be, but it's such a unique way to signify a special story moment, a story beat, without having to completely explain it to us. We understand with the characters.
Could that almost be, well, we can make a fancy term here, you and I. Is that more like symbiotic symbolism?
Yeah,
is it something like that? Well, there we go. Symbiotic symbolism. Put it in Wikipedia right now. Sounds good. Any other aspects of the filmmaking really catch your eye? Looking at this from a kind of a technical angle, as much as a story or development angle?
I like that initial scene where Elliot is at school and E.T. starts exploring the house. And this isn't the first instance where we start seeing the connection between them. There are a couple of smaller moments while they're together at the house. Yeah. But that scene where Elliot's at school and we see E.T. exploring and exploring the fridge and watching TV and reading the comic, and you see E.T. putting all these pieces together, and then you see Elliot reacting to what E.T. is experiencing for the first time while at school. And so again, it's Spielberg telling us a story and giving us things to look out for and understand without just explaining them to us.
Agreed. The the exposition level is so low that even when all the science guys show up, that's never really like there's not a sit down speech like, "Hey guys, here's what's happening." That Peter Coyote gives the family. We're just reacting to it. And I really enjoyed that it wasn't like force fed. There's no, prologue and epilogue bumpers of, a long time ago, a galaxy far, far away. We don't need any of that stuff. We can just experience and watch as if we're an uninformed kid too, so I do like how they played that.
Do you have any specific favorite scenes in this movie?
Oh, good question. I mean, the school scene's fun, especially being a school teacher. Now I've never had to, I'm elementary, so we're not dissecting frogs or anything. But I love, I'm a Quiet Man fan, so to see the John Wayne, Catherine O'Hara kiss play out was fun. Um, oh man, I mean, everyone loves the last 15 minutes of the film where it's almost one complete musical composition from Williams, where it goes from escape, chase, finale, credits, and in one long orchestrational beat you go through the highs and the lows of that story and the closure of it all. So it's hard not to look at that ending peak and not go, wow, that's the one.
Yeah.
So yourself, do you have anything that you said the school scene a little bit, and then the introduction of the spaceship at the beginning, what else kind of pings?
Well, I've got to say that last 15 minutes, which I'm sure is cheating in some way to say
It
that's my
is.
favorite, but
Yeah.
the bike chase and the flight and then the departure of E.T. is the very definition of iconic.
Yes.
And I can't imagine a scene in any movie that finds me more invested or more emotional, that even just thinking about it, honestly.
Right.
It's
beyond
words.
It's amazing. I'm always amazed by that story that I've heard about it, where Williams wrote the music, and he wrote that unified huge piece, and he did it without seeing Spielberg's scenes. Spielberg said, no, you write the music. I'll edit my film to the things you make in music. So when I think of the editing for this, to do the opposite of what we normally get, where a finished edited piece is something that the composer then chops and makes, his or her contributions for. But for Spielberg to see Williams's greatness and say, no, I'll shape my movie to you because you're driving this car right now, in terms of the tone of everything, that also makes those last 15 minutes just soar.
There's another thing I want to put in the show notes. It's a video of Spielberg and Williams sitting together at a piano, and Williams just sort of taking him through the music and thinking, okay, let's see how this applies to this scene and see how we can fit this together. And so that's another great thing for you to check out later.
Yeah, I'm in for that. You bet.
No, our characters. What about Elliot? Do you have to say?
I love Elliot. I in my family, I'm big brother, so I mean, I definitely steer to Robert Vergnon's character a little bit, but at the same time, I'm I'm from a family of divorce. Now, my parents didn't divorce till high school, but I know what it's like when dad's not around and mom's doing her best, and you kind of get forgotten along the way. So I know where Elliot's coming from a little bit, as the kid that no one listens to a little bit, but at the same time longs for something to put connection to. So I really liked Henry Thomas's performance, where I don't find him to be an overcoached or overemphasizing, overdoing it kind of pretentious child actor kid who's, been doing this for 3 years and, or, in the 80s came from Star Search and is a theater nerd, where it didn't seem overcoached. It just felt so natural. And for all I know, that was pure coaching, and he's a pro, and he came into this. I don't remember his casting story of how unknown he was at the time, but I love how approachable and natural his performance was. I do know that they shot this in sequence, where they wanted those genuine reactions to come along the way at the same time that the characters are experiencing them. So I think that helps guide those young performers along. But I couldn't help but be impressed by Henry Thomas. Yourself?
As a character, I just like how he's such a kid.
Yeah,
like a relatable kid. He doesn't understand maybe necessarily the reality of his father's departure. Oh, he's just in Mexico, and I'll see him again soon. He's still trying to fit in with his older brother and his friends. And when he first lets E.T. inside, he shows him around the room the way you'd expect a kid to, focusing on things that aren't important to you and me, but
No.
at that stage in your life, it has significance.
Yeah.
Things like action figures, things like your pet
Mm-hmm.
fish, like Pez dispensers. I mean, things that have
Yeah.
that have no meaning, but it's in the room, and this is my
Mhm.
room, so I'm going to show you to my room, and that's exactly
Right.
how Elliot behaves.
I like how just and I say this as a school teacher, I like how middle of the bell curve he was. We see a lot of, we see a lot of youth portrayals in films where they're either a certain quirk dialed to 12 just for the sake of being a quirky, unique character and kid, or we see some kid stereotype character or performance where they're smarter than the room.
Mm-hmm.
Where that classic thing where the kids that aren't listened to are the disenfranchised style of character who just happens to be this, a really smart kid that no one notices. He just seems nice, ordinary, not too dumb, just right in the wheelhouse of normal. And I'm impressed by that, where they didn't need to over varnish him with quirks and characteristics. They just made him a kid. His quirks were just him being himself.
Right. And then the sense of responsibility he comes to feel for E.T. He says during the
Mm-hmm.
laboratory scenes, he came to me.
Oh,
You guys are killing him.
yeah,
He came to me. Let me be responsible for him. Let me
yeah.
decide what is best for him. And I have more to say about that a little bit later in regards to themes and relevance. But to me,
Yeah,
that's him growing up. That's him sort of taking the role of his father in caring for somebody else. And
absolutely.
I love that about his character, and that he literally grows up uh, while ET is there and learns from him and learns to sort of move on with his life in a certain way.
Hmm. I know this. I don't think anyone's ever going to put this on the coming of age, movie shelf, but it deserves to.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's probably thought of as being a sci-fi fantasy classic first, but no, it's a legit. Even though it's a small arc, even though it probably takes place over 3 days of time, it's a true coming of age story for sure.
Now, what about just ET as a character?
Oh man, I I like that. Well, gosh, he's got you with his eyes. You know what I'm
And what about the
saying?
slow
Where
reveal of those eyes? I
Oh,
mean, just
absolutely. Hmm.
the body shape first, and then
Yeah.
fingers pointing at plants or around corners, and his footprints.
I think that's another layer where, like, a lot like Elliot and a lot like Henry Thomas's performance, this isn't or again, overproduced or over dynamic extraterrestrial creature. I think we've seen other films since and before that really feel like they have to make it be so daring, unique, edgy, flashy, for the sake of being edgy and flashy. And here we have a barely legged, floppy footed, long neck, gangly, pudgy looking little blob. I mean, it's not a very charismatic, so to speak, figure, but it's just that's where it's not the exterior, it's the interior. It's the conveyance and the way that it just acts that says more about it than its looks. And I'm impressed by that.
Right. We get the full face at the same time Elliot finds him in the cornfield. And so we have that moment
Hmm.
of discovery with Elliot, which is again Spielberg putting us in the perspective of this child and
Absolutely.
experiencing things with him. And watching E.T. sort of figure things out. Again, reading the Buck Rogers comics, playing around with the
Hmm.
speak and spell, and watching the TV and taking away things from that, thinking about the phone, putting it all together, learning to
Yeah.
talk. This is an intelligent life form, and he's learning at a very quick pace. And we are sort of understanding what he wants to do, what he wants to accomplish during his time on
Hmm.
Earth, and that's to get away, to get back to the
Yeah.
people he loves.
And even though it's an intelligent life form, there's still a fragility to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's not this over dominant, amazing alien thing that's just indestructibly present. It's fragile. And I like that. That there's risk and peril for his fears, or if ET is a he. I think I remember reading that it's not any gender, but and that ET's fears are just as parallel to Elliot's, and instead of just this, again, same, we've seen other aliens and in other stories be the dominant flashy thing, and it's nice that it's parallel and equal.
Well, he's dependent on Elliot.
Oh, sure.
The whole reason he sort of reveals himself to Elliot and sticks around with Elliot is because Elliot sought him out and fed him Reese's Pieces.
Hmm.
This is somebody who sort of provides for him and gives him a place to seek shelter. Um,
Hmm.
Now, at the start of the film, when his kind are still there and the spaceship's still there, we see how connected they are with each other. The glowing in their
Right.
chest is some sort of signal. And that, I think, makes the separation from them all, them leaving him behind, all the more meaningful. And
Right.
then beyond that, his subsequent connection with Elliot, even more powerful as well, because we see that he seeks these personal connections, these intimate connections, almost as a means of survival.
Right. And to echo what you said before, all of that is done without wordy exposition.
Mm-hmm.
It's done through connection, time spent together, symbolism. It's really less is more, and it's really strong for that.
And it always sort of hurts me watching E.T. forming this bond with Elliot, but still missing his own kind. There's a moment where they've taken the communicator to the bald spot in the forest, and Elliot says, you don't have to go away. You can stay here, and I can take care of you. But E.T. points at his heart, and he says, ouch, I miss and I love my people. I miss my kind. Yet at the end, when his kind return, he says to Elliot, come. And Elliot has to accept the reality. No, I have things to do here. I have a family here, just like you have a family there. I have to stay. And there's that moment of understanding between the two of them, and that wonderfully emotional hug between the two of them as well, as E.T. wraps his arms around him and just sort of rubs him. Like, it's such a powerful moment as they say goodbye, and knowing that it's goodbye.
Yeah. Man. And then there's the music selling every emotional moment of it. I can't imagine what this film would be like in lesser hands than John Williams. It's just so it's in lockstep with how we absorb, remember, and feel this film with the music. I can't picture it with kishy 80s songs as if it's Guardians of the Galaxy, or I can't picture it with I don't know, just I don't know who could have got this sweep and yet still this innocence at the same time. It's so perfect of a score.
Do you have anything to say about Mike or Michael as a character?
A little as Big Brother, that's a place where I saw as a lens for myself to see it. I like how he comes around. I like that he's a Big Brother with his own things, but at the same time understands that his brother's there, and I like that he recognizes, like during the shirt scene in the garage, where he recognizes that his little brother's going through some stuff because of Dad, and that that he has to support him on it, as Big Brother, and to see him rise to the occasion for the rescue portions at the end of the film is really encouraging. That the character that started as kind of being snotty and dismissive in different, I keep saying the words in different films, but that could have stayed snotty and dismissive all film as like a second antagonist, but didn't, and I like that evolved so nicely.
I like that he realizes that his mom's going through some stuff too. He is the bully older brother, but he's also trying to act as the man of the house. And he's looking out for his mother. And there at the beginning, when they're eating dinner together, and Elliot mentions his father being in Mexico with Sally, I believe. I assume that's the woman he left the mother for. And Mike said, shut up, man. Don't you care about how other people feel? And he's sensitive to the fact that his mother misses the father as well. So he's stepping up into that man of the house role. But once it is revealed that Elliot has found E.T., he does become the supportive older brother and dedicates himself to Elliot's protection and to E.T.'s protection, and is willing to go leaps and bounds just to make sure everybody's taken care of.
Yeah. How's Gertie for you to finish our round of characters?
She's so funny. I love how she teaches E.T. in certain ways, and let's introduce you to Sesame Street, and I taught him how to talk, and he knows how to talk now. And she's such a cute character, and how she interacts with E.T., and again in how her heart breaks for E.T. when he dies, and then as he says goodbye as well.
Yeah. No, she's fabulous.
Do you have anything to say about the mother? I don't have any detailed notes about Mary, but
no, I'm glad. I'm glad she also had a come around moment
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the film where, obviously when her son is lost and she's worried, that's a nice scene to know that she notices, especially, a few scenes after not noticing a thing, including the alien standing in her own kitchen. Um, so and this is going to sound like a parent thing for me, but um, during that hug moment, at the end of the film, when she falls to her knees with that realization of, look at my son over there, care for something other than himself, or look at my son find fulfillment in love, where obviously it's been lacking for him, where she watches her son's cup fill, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and to watch her hit her knees of just I don't know, not shock or dismay, but just shared feels.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that moment from her where that it felt so it just matched where we were as being crushed. It wasn't a facial expression. It wasn't a hand on a heart. It wasn't an exasperated sigh or an "aw." It was release.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the way Dee Wallace played that scene.
Yeah, that moment got to me as well. It's almost like you're
Oh,
you're witnessing her heartbreak for her son's heartbreaking.
yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Mm. Man, oh man.
now, the last sort of character or characters I have to
Okay.
mention is Keyes
Yeah.
and his associates. From the start of the film, they're very well established as antagonists, and I'm careful to
Hmm.
use the word antagonists rather than villains because these aren't necessarily bad guys. Um,
Yeah.
but we have the focus of the camera on the keys on his belt and the searching for ET, and he gets his own musical motif that is very clearly established every time him or the people he's associating with appear.
Mhm.
And we
Yeah,
don't
that bassoon shows up.
right,
Yep.
and we don't see any of their faces
No.
until Keyes shows up in the house towards the end of the film. And so these are literally just almost things rather than people until
Yeah.
that moment where Keyes shows up and they he reveals as himself as somebody who's sort of dreamed of this along with Elliot.
I know. That's the part that connects for me is that, it could have been really easy to leave him be a strong antagonist, but for when he shares with Elliot, I've been dreaming of this too since I was 10 years old. You know, it all of a sudden sends that thought bubble and question mark in our brains as an audience, like, whoa, this is a supporter, not an opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the same time, if you're really going to get trippy, has was he a boy meeting this a similar alien at some point previous in a different time? Like if someone wanted to get really meta about all that, you really could.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not saying alien abduction craziness where all of a sudden he's grown up to be this government spook trying to get rid of all that, but makes you wonder, gives you pause, and I admire that way.
Right. And once he's revealed his face and after E.T. dies, the others start taking their masks off as well. And I think
Hmm.
it's the first moment where you see everybody else having sympathy
Yep,
for,
respect the
yeah,
moment.
for other life. They
Definitely.
see him as a life form rather than as a specimen. So that's a
Hmm.
powerful moment. But the whole fact that Keyes has compassion for Elliot and his relationship with E.T. He says, "I'm glad he
Yeah.
met you first. I'm glad that
Oh, love
that
that
you were
line.
there to look after him."
Yep.
And then coming along with Mary just for the spectacle of things. He's not one of the
Hmm.
ones trying to reclaim ET to dissect him in a
Nope.
laboratory. He's
Nope.
there,
Not trying to stop anything either. Like, along for the ride. Witness.
right.
To
He's there
witness.
to
Yep.
witness this thing that, as he says, he's been dreaming of since he was a kid as well. And so I
Mhm.
really like Keyes as a character in the same way as Mike or as Mary. They come around in the end.
Hmm. Definitely.
Any other character things to talk about?
Not for me. I'm good. I know it's a famous deleted character and scene. I know Harrison Ford was supposed to be the headmaster of this school. He was the husband of the screenwriter Melissa Matheson at the time, and I know it would have been a distracting takeaway to be like, oh wow, look at that, it's Harrison Ford in a film full of unknowns. So I'm glad he's not here as the headmaster of school, but it would have been a fun, mom and dad called, well, not mom and dad, but mom and son called to the principal's office and it's Harrison Ford. I
Right.
can only imagine how fun that scene could have been, but it truly would have been exploitative and in a different movie,
Yeah, it would have been
so
very distracting, I think.
yeah.
Uh, Now, as far as music goes, I have to echo what you were saying a moment ago that
Yeah.
I think this is a John Williams score and theme that makes me the most emotional.
I think so too.
That bike chase music might be my favorite action adventure sequence of all time. I feel all of the emotions every time I watch, all the way to the closing moments of the movie. I wrote in my notes, perhaps the best closing music of all time. The power
I think it is.
and the emotion of those final musical just those final musical moments. It's so powerful the way Williams has composed that and the way it matches the visuals on the screen.
I'm in lockstep with you. I think it's the best closing musical moments of any film I've ever seen. You know, the that track, that chase / finale track. I was on the drive to the theater for the screening last week. I was listening to that, and I'm crying in my car just listening to the music without the visuals because the music is just so good. So, I like that. I like the way it is rousing, where, I mean, it's an excitable score on one level, but at the same time, it capitalizes that excitement with emotion, because a bike chase, you know, shouldn't make us cry, but here we are crying, you know. So I don't know what chord he strikes that's just so perfect, but it's good. And then to go from before, the musical motif they give keys, where almost in Peter the Wolf style, you know, he gets the bassoon, and it's not his Imperial March by any means, but just the like you said, the variety of motifs and the skill of Williams to do that. His work is just so layered, where I don't feel like I'm listening to repetitive cues anywhere. A lot of film music today feels a lot like filler, or feels like the same, you know, 8 bars of something repeated over and over again, where there's just not depth and there's not layers. But in this film, between what Keys is with the bassoon and the way that different things are used in different places, and then when it all flushes to the last 15 minutes and just bursts, it's amazing. I when I try to, I find myself attempting to rank this stuff every now and then, and I don't know if E.T. is his best, because he's had so many. I don't know if it's his best score of all time. Those last 15 minutes really sell it. I'm a Superman fan when it comes to his score, because there's more of it all film, and it still has the variety of all the motifs and all that. But man, it's good.
It is good. And, you know, all the little themes too. I call it the twinkle theme. I'm sure there's a proper term for it, but it's ba-dee dee da 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 dum. I love that from the very moment it first appears in sort of like the opening credits. We've got the eerie music that sort of establishes this as sci-fi, almost horror film-esque in certain aspects. And then as the aliens, the E.T. life forms start appearing, we get that first rendition of the twinkle theme, and it sort of comes to represent E.T. himself. And then you've got the Adventures on Earth theme, and you've got the bike chase theme, and they do culminate in those final 15 minutes. And it is one of the few pieces in the world that I think could honestly make me cry every time I hear it. It is so powerful.
Oh man. Speaking of things that make you cry, when you dive into things that are deeper, themes and relevance and emotional takeaways and things like that, what do you take away from this film on that kind of existential, larger level?
Well, just one of the smaller ones first. Discovery for discovery's sake, rather than for the dissection of it, I think is one of the more on the nose themes of the film. But on a bigger picture scale, growing up. You know, E.T. arrives at a time in these kids' lives when home is rough because their father is gone, and they're sort of arguing with each other as brothers, and they cling to this idea that he's somewhere, but really he's sort of unattainable. But in finding E.T., Elliot learns responsibility for someone else, focusing on others rather than on yourself, and that sometimes people leave and it's not your fault. They just have other places to be, and that applies to him in regards to his father, and that applies to him in regards to E.T. as well. It's not Elliot's fault that they're leaving. He had his relationship with them, and it was time for them to move on for one reason or another. But that's just part of growing up. Right.
I think I'll spin that into the idea of just to connect it more to the technical aspect as well of. One takeaway for me is seeing things from a child's point of view, you know, just not just that camera level, but just Elliot's experiences and even the symbiotic relationship we're given between the two characters, E.T. and Elliot. Just that, you know, this is one of those movies that doesn't go over a child's head because it goes straight to their head,
Mm-hmm.
in such a great way where the stances of adults are secondary, that this is about how the kids feel about it. And I really admire that thematic level to where how they're going to go with that.
Agreed. And then really another big one for me is this concept of true friendship and connection with others.
Yes.
I think a lot of times we're friends with people because we interact with them regularly rather than because we have any sort of meaningful relationship with them. And sometimes it's even just because of what we can get from them. And that is not at all the friendship between Elliot and E.T. in this movie. They share a literal connection. They're both alone. They're both sort of cast out from their peers, intentionally or not. And the bond they form with each other is one of mutual support and admiration. It's love, truly. And that's what
Is.
I think lies at the center of true friendship. I've got best friends that I've known since high school, and I live with one of them. I lived with another one for 7 years, and the friendship I have for those guys is one of love. They are my best friends because I have a meaningful relationship with them. And I think that's what the movie is really emphasizing with those two characters.
Mm-hmm. No, I know you're right. Every movie has a lesson being kind of the niche and the theme of my site. I always frame these as life lessons, and yeah, number 4, the closing lesson of my review is the bonds of special friendship, right along the same lines of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other takeaway for me is the last one and kind of on my list a little bit is I call it the strong desire to be home and have a home. Because this is still your I know it's kind of, this isn't quite home is where the heart is in terms of like a craft store kind of sign, but E.T.'s kind of left behind and really longs to return home. Like you said before, like as much as he's having a fantastic bond with Elliot, his hurt and his ouch is homesickness. And you don't get that way without having a special attachment to a home that's beyond the basic human need for just shelter, and Elliot's having that too, where this doesn't feel like home right now. It might be the same house that he's been in and things like that. And obviously mom, brother, mom, Michael and Gertie are all there, but it's not the same and something is missing. And the cohesive full family unit was his sense of home, and he's not, and he doesn't have it. So between the strong sense of home with Elliot and E.T. to be home and have a home really rang for me.
Right, and his relationship with E.T. strengthens his relationship with his family too, because they are sort of all in it together. So yeah, that's great. By the end of the film, I think he does see his home with these three, even absent of his father, as a true home.
Mm-hmm.
Any other final closing thoughts that you haven't said yet about the movie or anything else?
I know one of the notes you put kind of at the end of themes was the relevancy of this film culturally. Then I think we were in that sprawling post-70s, 80s time where Star Wars made it okay to really enjoy fantasy and have alien films and that were cuddly and interesting and all that, because this would have been between Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi a year later, and where it was okay and it was cool to be a science nerd and have aliens. It was post-Apollo America with the space program and all that. We were in Space Shuttle 80s. And so I think this came at a time where the iron was hot for science fiction, and it played so well in that way. I don't know how this film would play if it came out now. I don't know. Have you given that kind of any thought, or I'll pitch that question right back to you?
That is a good question, whether it would do as well. It certainly doesn't have the adventure spectacle of something like Infinity War, just to
Right.
apply it to something in theaters now. But
or even How to Train Your Dragon.
Right.
Like the whiz bang pow of kids films now is just so much more frenetic and faster than this film. I don't know how it would play.
Right. I don't know. I think if you get to a certain point in the movie, if you can get somebody to sit still and watch until, honestly, the Halloween scene, probably.
Yeah.
I think if you can make it to that point, you're enthralled for the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's do you think it has what am I guess what I would stem way and say this. How does it feel in a societal way to you? Is this, I feel like there's a voice to the single parent household thing that kind of comes out of this, where I think that would ring true today, but yeah, I don't know if the busybody part would go.
I'm not sure. I do agree with the single parent household. This is in a way saying that that's okay. You know, I was
Yeah.
doing a little bit of research earlier. This is sort of a self-portrait of Stephen in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
in
I've read that as well.
echoing his events of his childhood and being alone in certain respects and having
Yeah.
that divorced that divorced parenthood in his life. So, yeah,
I know this is a trashier question. Could this film be remade today?
ooh,
I hope they never
I hope
touch
they
it.
don't either. I can't
Yeah.
imagine E.T. as anything other than the sort of puppet thing he
Hmm.
is in this movie.
Yeah, I know. Did you see or have you seen the version that came out for its I think 25th anniversary back when yeah, 20th anniversary 2002. I know Spielberg kind of did the George Lucas thing and came in and kind of digitally tinkered it a little bit. Were you okay with that, or are you one of those folks who were like, oh man, now you kind of painted on something that didn't need any more paint?
Well, I was looking out for it specifically because what in that release, it was the DVD release, and he edited
Hmm.
out the guns into walkie
He
talkies,
did.
right?
Yeah,
Well, I have the Blu-ray 30th anniversary, I suppose, or maybe 35th, I
I
don't
do as
know.
well.
And they have the guns back. So,
Yeah,
and it makes sense to me because there's actually a specific line said by the mother, by Mary, about the guns. Oh, don't use the guns. And I can't imagine, I don't know if they cut that for that release so that it made
yeah.
sense, or I don't know. I'm glad that they fixed it for the Blu-ray release.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, no, that's the tinkering. I wonder would we play it or not. So no, I know you kicked us towards final thoughts. So I'll borrow your question here. I don't know, what impact has the movie made in your life?
I don't know if it's made an impact so much. Like this is something that I think about daily in
Sure.
that way. It's a movie that makes me feel a lot, and I think
Hmm.
anything that makes me feel a lot in one way or another is just important to me. You know,
Yeah.
I like feeling things. That's why I watch movies. And I'm a firm believer in, if you don't let yourself feel things while you watch something, while you watch a movie, then you're not experiencing it the way it's supposed to be experienced. And so
Well
when
said.
I watch a movie, if it's going to make me cry, it's going to make me cry. And I don't really
Hmm.
care who sees or anything like that. I will
Me
openly
too.
weep at anything. And this one just happens to make me weep a lot more than a lot of others. So that's okay
Yeah.
with me.
No, for me, this will stand as a bar setter in terms of, I guess, a measuring stick to other children's fantasy, like you said, How to Train Your Dragon and other films like that. I look at the simplicity and
Mhm.
and like we said before, the minimalist in terms of exhibition and just exposition, I should say, and the technical qualities of this film. I put this film on as a critic and also as just a viewer. I put this up on that kind of pedestal as how are other films of this particular genre or even science fiction, how do they measure up to something that's just so pitch perfect like this film is? So for me, this is always on the list of, well, it ain't ET. It's
Right.
always that hard act to follow kind of film where this is the thing that's always better than another thing I see, where I don't think anything's sniffed this being close. I've had emotional feels involving teens or kids in other films. Like a recent example that just crushed me was A Monster Calls,
Mhm.
where child with cancer and he has these visions of the tree and all that. And that film, oh, that was an ugly cry disaster too. But not like this. This is a happy tear film, thank
Yeah.
goodness. So it's a hard act to follow. I know Pixar really tries, because they have that Pixar punch where they can get some films that involve kids, involve great themes that really punch the tear ducts. But I don't know if any of them have this level. So for me, it's a big time measuring stick.
Yeah, I can certainly agree with that. Does this movie make me feel more than E.T. does?
Hmm.
And as
And it's
genuinely
hard.
as E.T. does.
Yes. Yeah. It's I expect it to evolve for me more. And I know I said it earlier, as a parent, I can't wait for my kids to see this film someday. And I hope they absorb it in the same way I did, even if it's rough the first time with just fear,
Mhm.
and trepidation. But I hope they come back to it someday and be like, wow, look at those feels. And there's really something going on there. So, yeah.
This will certainly be a film that I show my kids one day, when and if
Mhm.
hopefully I do have them. So
Take your time.
yeah,
Take your
no rush
time.
at the moment.
I got 5-year-old and 3-year-old, plenty. Whew, yeah, the plenty going on there. Yeah.
Well, with that, that is the end of the official 77th episode of Cinescope. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, John.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Contact for the show, facebook.com/Cinescope Podcast and @Cinescope Pod on Twitter. Please continue to rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes to help with visibility. And if you have feedback or ideas, you can email me at thecinescopepodcast@gmail.com. Now, Don, where can people find you online?
Search for me, anything that shows up for Every Movie Has a Lesson. So everymoviehasalesson.com. You can search that also on Twitter and on Facebook. I have the fan page there, and obviously Twitter doing whatever it does there. I'll send a shout out to a new social media app that's kind of going around that our buddies at Feel and Film have kind of turned me on to. There's this new thing, I think it's called Stardust, where you're supposed to kind of do these little hot take video, little social shares of stuff like that. So if you can search for the user movie lessons, because my title is too long. So if you search for movie lessons on Stardust, you'll find me there. But most of the time, it's just Every Movie Has a Lesson.
Okay. The best place to find me is @Chadadada on Twitter. That is CHADADADA. Also, facebook.com/Chad.Hopkins. And there is my other podcast, which has thankfully still been going regularly. That is a podcast where we talk about The Office from NBC, the television show. Ended 5 years ago. We just finished season 4. We're starting season 5 next week. We're getting close to that halfway point. And it's a lot of fun. I talk with my friend Katie every week on that show. You can find out where podcasts can be found and at workplacepodcast.com. That is An American Workplace. And show notes for this show, including that review from Roger Ebert and that video featuring Spielberg and Williams that I mentioned, will all be available in the show notes, and the contact information, thecinescopepodcast.com. And that's all for this week. Maybe a little bit rusty, but thank you so much, Don, for coming back for the return of Cinescope.
You're very welcome, Chad. It was an absolute pleasure. Anytime you need another guy again, I'll be happy to fly in the co-seat with you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for listening to episode 77. I'm Chad Hopkins. This was Cinescope, and we'll be back next week with episode 78. Have fun and celebrate movies.